While most Roman emperors were consumed by war and conquest, Hadrian chose to wander the long borders of his realm. He sketched domes with his quill, measured provinces with his steps, and treated imperial power as a heavy cloak he could lay aside when he wished. Tonight, let us follow in his footsteps, from the Great Wall in Britain to the sunset over the Nile. In this story that needs no great effort to remember, we will witness the wandering life of an emperor who was also an architect. If imperial rule was a cage, Hadrian escaped it in the most elegant way possible by traveling far and wide. He left eternal stone pillars across the empire, and also left behind a heartbroken grief that would never fade. Close your eyes, and in the low, steady narration, listen to his meditations on the universe beneath the dome of the Pantheon. Tonight, by the soft glow of the fire, let us step into the true life of Hadrian, a life of quiet restraint and deep emotion. Hadrian, an emperor often misunderstood by history as simply melancholy, simply loved the wind of distant lands more than the confines of the palace. His life swung between extreme order and profound feeling, carrying the peaceful calm of a lifelong wanderer. In this gentle account, find your own peace and release. Good night. May you find the deepest comfort within the grand dreams Hadrian built. Imagine a man who held the highest power over the known world, yet chose to camp in the wilds of the empire for most of his days. He did not revel in the luxury of the purple palace, but wore a plain soldier's cloak and walked the dusty borderlands. Hadrian, the most enigmatic emperor in Roman history, once issued an order that baffled all his generals. Tonight, by the softly flickering fire, let us enter his real life through a story you do not have to struggle to remember. He built a great wall in the bitter winds of Britain not for invasion, but to draw a line between civilization and wilderness, and also to set a boundary between himself and the hunger for power. He lost the boy he loved most in the world beneath the sunset glow of the Nile, and turned the rest of his days into an endless journey of mourning and creation. Why would a man with supreme power be so obsessed with rebuilding Athens among ruins and imagining domes in the desert? Now, let your breathing grow slow and steady as we pass through the noisy Senate of Rome and return to the long road leading to distant horizons. When Hadrian inherited the empire from his predecessor Emperor Trajan, Rome was at the height of its military expansion. Yet the first act of the new emperor was to order a retreat from the lands recently conquered along the Tigris River. This decision cut through the Roman court like a sharp crack, shattering the greed of generals hungry for plunder. Hadrian stood quietly in the shadow of Trajan, his lean face showing no bloodlust, only the rational calm of an architect. He understood that an endlessly expanding empire would eventually collapse under its own weight, like a cathedral with unstable foundations. He did not want more territory, he wanted order, beauty, and solid walls that could enclose and protect civilization. And so the ruler who should have sat upon the golden throne began his escape shortly after his coronation. He cut his hair short and grew a beard in the style of Greek philosophers, a gesture considered deeply unconventional at the time. Carrying measuring tools and parchment, he left Rome, the center of imperial power, and set off on the long journey to the province of Britain. To him, the wind of distant lands and the perfect proportions of ancient temples felt far more real than the deceit and intrigue of court petitions. Between his travels across the empire, Hadrian returned to Rome and left behind a building that still takes people's breath away, the Pantheon. He did not carve his own name upon it, but humbly kept the inscriptions of earlier builders, yet the very soul of the structure was entirely his own. When you step into the vast circular hall and look upward, you will find no windows, only a great open oculus at the center of the dome. When Hadrian designed this dome, he thought not merely of stone blocks, but of the very logic of the cosmos. Every ray of sunlight falling through the opening was like time itself slowly parading through the hall. He spent many nights here alone, watching starlight fall through the center of the dome onto the cold marble floor. In his later years, he whispered to friends that in building the Pantheon, he had been constructing a sanctuary for his own soul. Among the intricate geometric proportions, he found an absolute truth he could never discover in the Senate. Architecture was more than a pile of bricks and stones, it was Hadrian's restrained defiance against the shortness of life and the permanence of history. Even now, when we close our eyes, we can almost hear the soft rustle of Hadrian's footsteps in that silent hall. Throughout Hadrian's journeys, a young man was always by his side. His name was Antinous. The emperor met the boy during his tour of Bithynia, and his melancholic beauty, reminiscent of ancient Greek sculptures, captured the lonely emperor's heart. Yet during a voyage on the Nile, the young man drowned by accident, and the calm waters swallowed the last warmth in Hadrian's life. That night, the emperor who ruled the world wept by the Nile like a child who had lost everything. This intensely personal and unrestrained outpouring of emotion was highly unusual in the history of Roman emperors, who valued stoic composure above all. From that moment, Hadrian's travels took on a sickly and grandly sorrowful tone. He ordered a city built at the spot where Antinous had drowned, naming it Antinopolis. He had the boy's face carved into thousands of marble statues, placed in every temple and every corner of the empire. He tried in this way to bring his lover back to life in the dawn of every province, to make his name live as long as the empire itself. This was an almost frantic aesthetic of disillusionment with fate, and the most heartbreaking undertone of Hadrian's long wanderings. In the years after losing his beloved, Hadrian traveled even farther, as if constant movement could help him escape the emptiness inside. He came to Britain, the northernmost edge of the empire, and ordered the construction of the famous Hadrian's Wall. He personally inspected the construction site, eating coarse bread and sleeping in hard tents alongside his soldiers. The wall was not built to separate enemies out of hatred, but to give the vast empire a stable, manageable boundary. Standing on a watchtower of the wall, he stared at the untamed primitive forests to the north and felt a sense of relief he had never known before. He realized that both the borders of an empire and the length of a human life have limits that cannot be crossed. He began systematic restoration of ancient monuments in Athens, rebuilding libraries and pouring his reverence for civilization into every stone pillar. These structures were no longer displays of power, but love letters he left for the future, traces of his passage through the world. He grew old while wandering, and his constant building softened the anxiety and sharpness of his youth. His travels were no longer driven by duty, but by a slow reconciliation with the world and with himself. Hadrian spent his final years at his villa in Tivoli, a place that held a miniature version of the entire empire. He had rebuilt, to scale, the most beautiful buildings he had seen during his travels, so that walking through the villa felt like wandering through Egypt, Greece, or Syria. By then he was seriously ill, yet he still loved to be wheeled out at night to sit by the pools and watch the moon. He wrote a short poem called On His Soul, restrained and sorrowful, filled with a calm gaze at the emptiness of death. He was no longer the stern emperor issuing decrees, but an old traveler about to depart for another land. His life began with compromise to power, but ended with absolute devotion to beauty and emotion. He left Rome an era of unprecedented stability, and left for himself a wandering epic that still warms the heart to this day. On an early morning, as sea breeze drifted through the villa's windows, he closed his eyes gently. He took with him all weariness, leaving only solid stone structures that continue to tell of his peace in the sunlight. Today, Hadrian's Wall remains a series of ruins stretching across green fields, yet the quiet still lingers. The dome of the Pantheon still welcomes, precisely at midday every day, a ray of light from the depths of the universe. Hadrian's life was like an endless journey, and with stone and deep affection, he built lighthouses upon the wilderness of history. As you lie in bed tonight, feeling the softness of your covers and the calm of the night, perhaps you too can wander aimlessly in your mind, just as Hadrian did. Let go of the utilitarian struggles of the day, the strict demands you place on yourself to be perfect. All great achievements will eventually turn to dust, but the pursuit of beauty and the protection of true love can cross 1,000 years to comfort you in this moment. Your breathing grows steadier, your consciousness fading softly into the sunset glow of Hadrian's world. There is no need to think of tomorrow's direction, for right now, you have reached the warmest harbor. May your dreams hold the gentle wind blowing from Britain and the faint light falling through the Pantheon. Good night. May you find the deepest peace under the protection of this traveling emperor.